Education is the most important thing to civilize any person, people, or a country. Welcome back, students. I'm your SST teacher Vandana Joshi, and you are watching SST June. Students, in history till now, we have studied about the colonial system. We have also studied about the Nawabs and the Rajas. We already know about the industrialization in our country and the implementation which were done by the Britisher during their rule. But today we are going to study about the civilization and the wave of different reforms during the British colonial period in our country, India. So let's start a new chapter in history, which is Civilizing the Native, Educating the Nation. The story of civilization in our country starts after the arrival of British in our country, when they started to educate to Indian people. So how they become to know that India is need to be civilized in their manner, and what was the reasons behind that. So let's start our today's chapter with the different topics. Our today's topics are how the British saw education, in which we will see about the tradition of Orientalism and education for commerce. So when the British arrived in our country, they started to become linguists. Linguist means a person who know several languages. So what is the reason behind to become a linguist? When the Britishers came to India, their main motto was to be as work as merchant. But after seeing the cultural activities in India, they started to implement their rules and regulation. And for that, they started to become the linguists to know the custom and values of our country. So, what are the changes which were introduced by the Britishers to make Indian educate and the civilized? Let's see the view of Britishers about the Indian education. According to Britisher, education in the pre-British era was largely informal. Some children were taught at home by private tutors, other children went to maktabs and the pathshalas. These schools could be located in the premises owned by wealthy persons or temples or the mosques, or even under shade-giving trees. There were no printed books. Teaching was done orally in the vernacular languages by gurus in Pathshala and by Maulvis in the maktabs. The centers of higher education were few in number. These were mostly patronized by rulers or the nobles, and the students were mostly upper class Hindu and the Muslims. Hindus receive higher education in tolls where the medium of instruction was Sanskrit, while Muslim receiving the higher education in madrasas where the medium of instruction was Persian. When the Britishers started their colonized system and they expanded their rule in our country, there was a need to recruit Indians at lower level administrative jobs. This made the British introduce English language and the civilized education in the country. So, how the tradition of Orientalism came into manner, and what is the meaning of Orientalism? The term Orient means the East. There was many English officials of the East India Company who were in favor of encouraging Indian language or Oriental rather than Western language. These people who were called Orientalists were led by William Jones and Harry Thomas Colebrook, who discovered the rich heritage of India's ancient past through sacred and legal texts produced in ancient period that they had translated into English. Warren Hastings, the Governor General, set up the first government-aided educational institute, the Calcutta Madrasa, for the study of Persian and Arabic. Jonathan Duncan founded the Sanskrit College at Banaras in 1791 for the study of Hindu law and philosophy. In these colleges, the students were trained in Hindu and Muslim laws and were expected to help the company in civil and judicial administration. In 1801, Fort William College was set up to train the civil servant for the company in Indian philosophy, literature, history, law, and culture. Encouragement was given to compile primary books, grammar, and dictionaries in Indian language. William Jones was another bright Sanskrit scholar who translated Abhigyan Shakuntalam, the great work of Kalidas, into English and prepared a digest of Indian law. He also helped in setting up the Asiatic Society at Kolkata in 1784. The scholars of the society tried to prove that Sanskrit is no way inferior to Latin or Greek, and Indian civilization was at pet with any other civilization of the world. One more implementation done in the education during the British period by Macaulay. Thomas Babington Macaulay was a great supporter of the Anglistic point of view. He believed that India was an uncivilized country that needed to be civilized. According to him, if Indians were taught English, they could understand the scientific ideas and rich literature of the West. Besides, the preachers of Christianity and the learners who had firm faith in Western education played a great role to bring intellectual revolution in India. They strongly criticized Orientalist version of learning. James Mill sharply opposed the Orientalist. According to him, it was unless to spend efforts and money to study Arabic and Sanskrit. He thought that if the Indians were given Western education, they would understand the British rule better and they could work as clerk in the British administrative in a better way. It was the one phase of British education in India. But what was the another phase of British education in our country? So let's see what is the education for commerce by the Britishers in India. The Britishers have a motive behind to educate the Indians in a modern education system. According to some historians, the British government's only motive behind spreading modern education was to create a class of educated Indian who would be English in their thoughts and taste. This would not only provide them with a cheap clerical force for the various administrative jobs, but also save the company from importing Englishmen who would have to be paid high salaries for working in India. Further, the English educated Indian would help to expand the market for British manufacturers and also reconcile the Indians to British rule. And what was the impact of new education system? The new education system was meant for producing clerks for the British administration. It neglected the study of Indian literature, law, philosophy, and history. It also neglected the scientific and technical education for Indian. In spite of its serious drawback, English education had some positive features. It brought English educated Indians into contact with modern knowledge as well as with modern ideas of liberty, equality, democracy, and nationalism. Also, English became a language of communication among educated Indians living in different parts of India. Later, it helped in the development of nationalism in India. So, students, here we have seen how William James started a new Anglican education policy in our country and what was the motto behind that education policy. In our next video, we will study more about the chapter in which we will see the national education policy which was started by the Britisher and what was the drawbacks of that policy. We will also study the reformers, those helped in that education policy in India. So for that, keep watching SST June.